All right, new Battletech enthusiasts. We've got a number of new players jumping into my channel here, jumping in to Battletech, and this is the golden age. This is like the era of the Star League in terms of Battletech narrative, because there are so many options out there in terms of immersion, in terms of play. It's a good problem. It's a little bit overwhelming. We asked the question, where to start? And that's what I wanted to focus on in this video, in this vlog, talking about miniatures, talking about resources, and we're going to look at some of the different model ranges and different acquisition methods to kind of help you jump in and help you really focus, because we can't be everywhere at once. And I promise with Battletech, and this is true of any miniature game, one of the awesome parts is over time, your collection is constantly growing, expanding, changing. That's a lot of fun of the game, to get these new pieces, to get these new units, paint them up, get them on the table. This is the direction that we're going to explore in. So from that entry point and then looking down the road as you build out a really awesome collection. So the first place to jump in, Game of Armored Combat, the starter set. We call it a starter set, but it's really much more than that, because a lot of starter sets that are out there, we see this with Warhammer 40,000, we see this with X-Wing miniatures, they're there to give you a little taste. They're incomplete. They're part of. The idea is to get you started to buy lots and lots of more things. The Game of Armored Combat starter set, it has everything in it. I mean, you can literally just stick with that. It's not crippleware. You could literally just stick with that and enjoy Battletech infinitely. So it's more like a complete board game, a complete tactical war game, than just enough to get you started, but you're going to have to buy a bunch of other stuff. You've got the maps, you've got the mechs, you've got the rules, everything ready to go. I want to focus on that range of miniatures, the Catalyst miniatures. And on a side note, in terms of acquisition, I would honestly say the Game of Armored Combat and the 2 Mech starter set, both of those together, if you can, purchase both of those. Simply because for the value of the head-to-head starter set, it's like $20-something, you get an exclusive mech, you get 2 more mechs, you get some more maps. The rules are a little bit different. They're streamlined. You're not going to use those, but for the price of admission, it gives you some more resources that directly bolt on to the Game of Armored Combat. It's like literally just combine the two. So I would recommend jumping in, if you can, with both of those. If not, you do the Game of Armored Combat and then jump into the 2 head-to-head starter set. These are the Catalyst miniatures. These are updated sculpts. They are plastic. They come with integrated bases. The nice part about these miniatures, the detail is fantastic. Detail is absolutely fantastic. You can play them. I mean, there's no hard or fast rules in Battletech, but because they are all sculpted the same, the bases are the same, they're plastic, they're that gray plastic, you can play them unpainted on the hex maps, and it looks fantastic. I mean, it literally looks like a board game. So jumping in with those and expanding out on the Kickstarter as it hits to retail, jumping in with the clans, jumping in with the Inner Sphere Lance packs, you can expand your collection through that miniature line, and they look great painted. And I want to encourage you to paint your miniatures, but that's a separate aspect of the hobby. If you play another war game and you have experience painting, it's really easy to jump in and paint your miniatures. If you are coming from a board gaming background or you've never painted stuff before, it can be very, very intimidating. And I understand that. And we'll explore that also on a kind of a sidebar a little bit later. But jumping in with the Game of Armored Combat, the Catalyst miniatures, they look great painted, they look great unpainted, and in that style, in that theme, as Catalyst releases stuff now in the future, everything will be to scale. Everything will be the same. Now, there are some other options, and that's where I want to kind of jump into and put out there, because as you see other players' collections, I'm a member of a number of Facebook groups, a lot of inspiration on there. People have different mechs. It's a natural question to ask, well, what are those mechs? What are those models? So being aware of some of the parallel miniature systems that are out there to jump into Battletech, it's good. And maybe you want to go in that direction. So the first group that we have, and I would say to avoid these miniatures, simply because they're a little bit older and the scale is different. Now, obviously, a deal is a deal, or if you inherit a collection, that's great. And I have some of these pieces myself in my own collection, but that's because at the time, that's where we were. The older Battletech starter sets, and we're talking old as in maybe from the 80s, or before this current Game of Armored Combat starter system, the mech systems before that, these miniatures, they're okay. They're to scale. The detail's not as crisp. They're much harder to find. Often what they have in price, they're the same as the Catalysts. At this point with the Catalyst miniatures, there's no reason to go backwards. There's no reason to go in that direction. So as you look online, or if you're trading and looking for deals, I would avoid the older starter sets, the older plastics, and just kind of leave them where they are. And again, I have a number of these pieces in my collection, but that was jumping in from years ago. That was jumping in from other times and other entry points. Catalyst would be that entry point. So we're going to put some of those older miniatures aside. Now we have metal miniatures. The primary source, Ironwind Metals, although there is still a lot of new old stock from the Rarpathel miniatures and other places that are out there. These metal Battletech miniatures, and Ironwind Metals has some of the old sculpts from the Lance packs. They have some of the newer sculpts of the Catalyst miniatures released in metal. The difference here is, of course, price. They're going to be a little bit more expensive. There's going to be some basic modeling involved. You're going to have to do some gluing, maybe some positioning and some filing. You're going to need bases. But the main aspect of these models, and it depends on the level of the sculpt, like the Stalker. The Stalker metal miniature Ironwind, it's a little small. Part of it's the pose. It's a little bit small. The scale is a little bit different depending mech to mech. If we look at something like the Spider, I think the Spider is a little bit too big compared to other mechs that are out there. So the difference in scale, but primarily being metal miniatures, and I have to say the bulk of my collection consists of these mechs because that's where we were at the time. The challenge with this is you need a little bit of modeling skill, and if you play unpainted, I'm being honest, it just doesn't look good. Bare metal miniatures filled in different colors, different bases. The uniformity is not there, and it kind of pulls you out of the game. There is a big difference between playing with uniform gray plastic, like a board game or tactical miniatures board game, versus stuff that was clearly miniatures that should be painted and built in that direction. So I wouldn't say avoid these miniatures, but looking at some of the older miniatures versus the new miniatures, a perfect example, the awesome miniature, literally the awesome mech, is awesome in the Catalyst plastics. It looks better than the metal miniatures. And I have two of the metal awesome miniatures. I've got the Catalyst. It looks better. You're going to see some of the sculpts look better. So the idea is if I was going to fill out the awesome, the Shadowhawk, some of these other mechs, then I'm going to go with the plastics. If I go with the metals, well, now they're going to mismatch. So do I prime them gray? If I'm painting everything up, then it's not a problem. Where you might want to go with some of the metal miniatures, there are a number of mechs that are just not offered yet in the Catalyst. And maybe you want some of those obscure machines. Although the release from the Kickstarter and from the retail, I think it's going to take a long time to roll out to retail. It is Catalyst. There's supply chain and management issues that push into that. So you might not want to wait, or there might be some pieces that you want to acquire for whatever reason that are just never going to make it to the plastics. Ironwind Metal fills that out perfectly. So we've got the Catalyst, yes. We've got the older Catalyst, Alpha Strike Lance packs and other things I would avoid. But, a deal is a deal. You jump in where you can. The Ironwind Metals still look fantastic. Still a lot of possibilities, especially with vehicles. But we have to see how they paint up, and we kind of have to understand there's going to be some assembly. These are wargaming pieces. And now we jump into the deep end. 3D printing, custom sculpts, alternative mechs. Because again, remember, the great thing about Battletech, we're selling these mechs. We're a corporation. We're selling these mechs. You can take scaled mechs. There are a number of miniature services out there, and you can kit bash and do different things. You can literally invent your own mech and pull it into the narrative and pull it into the lore. There are mech creation rules. You can take all of the mechs in the game, the technical manuals, break them down with the mech creation rules. They literally use these rules to create these machines. So you can pull in third-party mechs. You could be, hey, I have this idea for a mech, and I'm going to pull in scale from another miniature range. The scope of Battletech is amazing with the ability to be able to do that. The challenge with the 3D printed mechs, as you jump into that, scale, different quality of printing, you have to kind of do a little bit of detailing in terms of model prep. They are going to want to be painted up, so we are going to have to hobby them in that direction. So as you jump into that requires a little bit more research. That requires a little bit more hands-on. But I won't say stay away from 3D printing. I won't say, look, hey, there's some awesome custom third-party mechs that maybe you want to pull in. Some proxy machines, some interesting vehicles, some alternate vehicle sculpts. But moving into Battletech, being a miniatures game, those are the benchmarks. Those are the places to look. And that is as you move in with your Game of Armored Combat starter set and you start to get some ideas and you start building out, that's what I would explore. And that's the direction that I would take to literally attack this game.